Captain Marcus Chun woke up in a cell that looked like the inside of a diamond. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that glowed with soft blue light. He could see through them, but when he touched the surface, it felt as hard as steel. Outside his cell, strange creatures moved around in long robes that seemed to float rather than touch the ground. Marcus rubbed his head, where a nasty bump was still healing. 3 days ago, he had been the lead diplomat for Earth's first contact with the Velthari Empire. The mission was supposed to be peaceful. Humanity wanted to join the galactic community, and the Velthari were one of the most powerful civilizations in this part of space. But something had gone very wrong. The Velthari looked almost human, but taller and thinner. Their skin was pale gray, and their eyes were completely black with no white parts. They had no hair anywhere on their bodies. When they spoke, their voices sounded like whispers, but somehow Marcus could hear them clearly no matter how far away they were. Marcus remembered the meeting clearly. Ambassador Kethron had been explaining their rules for new species joining the galactic community. The rules were simple but harsh. Any species that wanted to join had to give up what the Velthari called primitive behaviors. This included things like eating solid food, feeling strong emotions, and creating art just for pleasure. These things make species weak, Kethron had explained in his whisper voice. They waste time and energy. We removed these flaws from ourselves 10,000 years ago. We are perfect now. Marcus had tried to argue. He explained that humans saw these things as strengths, not weaknesses. He talked about how sharing meals brought families together, how music could heal sadness, how art helped people understand each other. But the Velthari just looked at him like he was speaking nonsense. The meeting ended badly when Marcus refused to agree to give up human culture. Kethron called him dangerously primitive and ordered his guards to arrest the entire human delegation. Marcus fought back, but the Velthari had weapons that could freeze a person in place without hurting them. The last thing he remembered was watching his team get dragged away. While some kind of energy field made his body go numb, now he was here, in this crystal prison, waiting to see what would happen next. The sound of footsteps made him look up. Someone was coming down the hallway outside his cell. It was not one of the guards this time. This Velthari was different. She was taller than the others, and her robes were white instead of gray. Her movements were smooth and graceful, like she was dancing instead of walking. She stopped in front of his cell and looked at him with those black eyes. When she spoke, her voice was different too. Still a whisper, but somehow more musical than the others. "I am Empress Zethara," she said. "You are the human who thinks primitive behaviors are strengths." Marcus stood up slowly. He had heard of Empress Zethara. She was the ruler of the entire Velthari Empire, which controlled over 1,000 worlds. She was also supposed to be incredibly old, maybe 300 years, though she looked like she could be 25 in human years. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, trying to be respectful. "I am Captain Marcus Chun of Earth. I was hoping we could talk about joining the galactic community." She interrupted. "Yes, I know. Kethron told me about your interesting ideas." She moved closer to the cell wall. "He wanted me to order your execution immediately. He said you were too dangerous to keep alive." Marcus felt his heart speed up, but he tried to keep his voice calm. "And what did you tell him?" The Empress tilted her head slightly, like she was studying a strange bug. "I told him I wanted to meet you first. I have lived for 3 centuries, Captain Chun. I have conquered 47 different species and added their worlds to my empire. But you are the first creature I have met who thinks weakness is strength." "We don't think they are weaknesses," Marcus said. "We think they are what make life worth living." The Empress made a sound that might have been laughing, but it was cold and empty. "Worth living?" "Captain, my species solved the problem of living long ago. We do not waste time on pleasure or pain. We do not get distracted by meaningless sensations. We focus only on efficiency and perfection. But what's the point of being perfect if you can't enjoy it? Marcus asked. This time the Empress was quiet for a long moment. She stared at him with those black eyes, and Marcus felt like she was looking right into his soul. You truly believe that, don't you? She said finally. You actually think that you need to, what do you call it? Eat food instead of absorbing nutrients sufficiently. You think this makes you stronger? Yes, Marcus said without hesitation. I do. The Empress walked in a slow circle around his cell. Marcus could see other Velthari watching from a distance, but none of them came close. It was clear that even they were afraid of their Empress. Tell me about this eating, she said. Cathron's reports say that humans spend enormous amounts of time preparing food, consuming it slowly, and even gathering in groups to do it together. This seems incredibly inefficient. It is inefficient, Marcus admitted. But that's not the point. When I was a kid, my grandmother would spend hours in the kitchen every Sunday making dinner for the whole family. She didn't do it because it was efficient. She did it because she loved us. Love. The Empress repeated the word like it tasted bad. Another primitive emotion we eliminated long ago. How do you know it was primitive? Marcus asked. Maybe it was the most advanced thing your species ever developed, and you threw it away. The Empress stopped walking and stared at him again. For just a moment, Marcus thought he saw something flicker in those black eyes. Curiosity, maybe. Or confusion. You present an interesting theory, Captain Chen, she said slowly. Perhaps I should test it. Test it how? The Empress smiled, but it was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a scientist who had just thought of a new experiment. You claim that your primitive eating behavior has value. Very well, I will give you a chance to prove it. You may prepare one of these meals for me to observe. Marcus felt a surge of hope, but also fear. This could be his only chance to save not just himself, but maybe his entire species. And if I can prove it, he asked, then perhaps we will discuss new terms for humanity's place in the galaxy, she said. But if you cannot, she let the threat hang in the air. Marcus took a deep breath. What do you want me to cook? The Empress stared at Marcus through the crystal wall, waiting for his answer. Marcus's mind raced through possibilities. What kind of meal could possibly show the Velthari the value of human culture? It had to be something simple enough that he could make it with whatever ingredients they might have available, but meaningful enough to prove his point. I need to know what ingredients you can provide, Marcus said carefully. Do you have anything like eggs? Grain that can be made into bread? Fruit that can be squeezed for juice? The Empress looked confused. We do not have these things. We have not needed food for 10,000 years. Our bodies are fed through nutrient absorption pods. She gestured to a small device on her wrist that looked like a metal bracelet. All necessary vitamins, minerals, and energy are delivered directly into our bloodstream. It takes 30 seconds per day and provides perfect nutrition. Marcus felt his heart sink. How could he cook anything without ingredients? But then the Empress continued. However, we do have biosynthesis laboratories. They can create any molecular structure if we have the proper information. Your ship's computers were not destroyed when you were captured. We have access to your databases. A spark of hope returned. You mean you could create ingredients based on the molecular information stored in our ship's food database? Theoretically, yes, the Empress said. Though I cannot understand why anyone would want to recreate such inefficient substances when perfect nutrition is available. Marcus smiled for the first time since his capture. Your Majesty, would you be willing to let me use these biosynthesis labs? I promise you, what I create will be completely harmless. The Empress was quiet for several minutes. She walked around his cell again, those black eyes never leaving his face. Marcus could practically hear her thinking. "This is fascinating," she said finally. "You are a prisoner facing execution, and yet you smile when talking about preparing food. You seem genuinely excited by the prospect." She paused. "Tell me, Captain Chun, what is it you plan to make?" Marcus thought about his grandmother's kitchen again. The smell of bacon on Sunday mornings. The sound of eggs crackling in the pan. The way his whole family would gather around the old wooden table, talking and laughing while they ate. "Something my grandmother used to make," he said. "The simplest meal I can think of. Scrambled eggs, toast with butter, and fresh orange juice. Nothing fancy. Just basic comfort food." The Empress tilted her head. "Comfort food? Food provides comfort?" "The best food does," Marcus said. "It's not just about nutrition. It's about memories, about feeling safe and loved, about connecting with other people." "Impossible," the Empress said, but Marcus noticed she didn't sound as certain as before. "Food is fuel, nothing more." "Then let me prove you wrong," Marcus challenged. "What do you have to lose? If I'm right, you learn something new about the universe. If I'm wrong, you can execute me knowing for sure that humans are primitives who deserve their fate." The Empress was quiet again. Marcus could see other Velthari gathering in the distance, watching their conversation. He wondered if they were curious about what their Empress was doing, talking to a primitive human for so long. "You would actually consume this substance yourself?" she asked. "These eggs and toast?" "Of course," Marcus said. "That's the whole point. We don't just prepare food, we share it. Eating alone is, well, it's not nearly as good as eating with someone else. You want me to consume it as well?" The Empress sounded shocked. Marcus nodded. "If you're willing. I know your body isn't designed for it anymore. But if your biosynthesis labs are as advanced as you say, they should be able to create food that won't harm you." The Empress began pacing back and forth in front of his cell. Marcus could tell she was struggling with the decision. Everything he was suggesting went against 10,000 years of Velthari evolution and culture. "My advisors would call this madness," she said. "Kethron would demand your immediate execution if he knew I was even considering it." "Then don't tell him," Marcus said. "This is between you and me." The Empress stopped pacing and looked at him directly. "You realize that if this experiment fails, if you cannot demonstrate the value you claim this activity has, I will not only order your death, but the destruction of your entire planet. Earth will be classified as a dangerous influence on galactic stability." Marcus felt the weight of that threat, but he also saw something else in the Empress's eyes. Behind the coldness and the certainty, there was something that looked almost like curiosity, real curiosity. Not the clinical interest of a scientist, but the wondering of someone who had lived for 300 years and was encountering something completely new. "I understand," Marcus said, "but I also believe that once you experience what I'm talking about, you'll understand why humans fight so hard to preserve these so-called primitive behaviors." The Empress made her decision. "Very well, Captain Chun. You will have access to our biosynthesis laboratories. You will have one opportunity to create this meal and demonstrate its supposed value. But you will work under constant supervision. And if you attempt any kind of escape or sabotage, you will be killed immediately." "Thank you, Your Majesty," Marcus said, relief flooding through him. "Do not thank me yet," the Empress warned. "You have set yourself an impossible task. You claim that inefficient food preparation will somehow demonstrate human superiority. But my species has spent 10,000 years proving that efficiency is the only path to perfection." The crystal wall of Marcus's cell suddenly became transparent and slid away. Two Velthari guards stepped forward, their hands resting on weapons that looked like metal wands. "You will come with us now," the Empress said. The biosynthesis laboratory is on the upper level of the palace. You will have access to your ship's food database and any equipment you require. As they walked through the corridors of the Crystal Palace, Marcus marveled at the alien architecture. Everything was smooth and flowing, like it had been grown rather than built. There were no decorations anywhere, no art on the walls. Nothing that served any purpose other than pure function. "Your Majesty," Marcus said as they climbed a spiral staircase that seemed to be carved from a single giant crystal. "Can I ask you something?" "Speak." "In all your 300 years, have you ever experienced anything that made you feel happy? Not satisfied with completing a task, but actually happy?" The Empress didn't answer for a long time. They reached the top of the staircase and walked down another corridor filled with that soft blue light. "Happiness is inefficient," she said finally. "It serves no purpose in a perfect society. But have you ever felt it?" Marcus pressed. The Empress stopped walking. The guards stopped too, waiting for a command. She turned to look at Marcus, and for just a moment, he saw something vulnerable in those black eyes. "No, Captain Chun," she said quietly. "I have not. And neither has any Valthari for 10,000 years. We are better for it." But even as she said the words, Marcus could tell she wasn't entirely sure they were true. The biosynthesis laboratory was the most advanced kitchen Marcus had ever seen. The walls were covered with panels of light that responded to touch, and in the center of the room was a platform that could apparently create any substance from pure energy. A dozen Valthari technicians stood around watching him with their black eyes, clearly fascinated by what this strange human was going to do. The Empress stood near the doorway, her arms crossed, watching everything. Marcus could tell she was nervous, though she was trying not to show it. "Computer," Marcus said, addressing the ship's database that had been connected to the alien systems. "Display the molecular structure for chicken eggs." A holographic image appeared above the synthesis platform, showing the complex arrangement of proteins and fats that made up an egg. The Valthari technicians whispered among themselves. Marcus guessed they had never seen anything so complicated used as food. "Begin synthesis," he ordered. The platform hummed, and slowly, 3 perfect eggs materialized on its surface. Marcus picked them up carefully, feeling their familiar weight and smooth shells. "Incredible," one of the technicians whispered. "Such complex molecular structures for the purpose of consumption." Marcus smiled. "These are actually some of the simplest foods we have." "Computer, now I need butter, bread, and oranges." As each item appeared on the synthesis platform, Marcus explained what he was doing to the watching Valthari. He showed them how butter was made from cream, how bread came from ground grain, how oranges grew on trees that his species had been cultivating for thousands of years. "But why is it so complicated?" asked one of the technicians. "Our nutrient absorption provides all necessary sustenance in a simple, efficient process." "Because it's not just about sustenance," Marcus said, cracking the first egg into a bowl. "Watch." He had requested a simple cooking surface that worked like a stove, and the Valthari had managed to create something that generated heat from below. Marcus put a pat of butter in a pan and watched it melt. The familiar sizzling sound filled the laboratory. "What is that noise?" the Empress asked, stepping closer. "That's the sound of the butter melting," Marcus explained. "The heat breaks down the fat molecules and releases aromatic compounds into the air." He took a deep breath. "That smell? That's part of the experience." The Empress leaned forward slightly, and Marcus saw her nostrils flare as she tried to detect the scent. Their species had kept their sense of smell, even if they didn't use it for food anymore. "It is unusual," she said carefully. Marcus beat the eggs with a fork, explaining how the proteins would change when heated. He poured them into the pan, and the soft scrambling sound began. The eggs turn from clear liquid to fluffy yellow curds. The transformation is remarkable, one of the technicians observed. But surely this cannot be more efficient than direct nutrient absorption? Efficiency isn't the goal, Marcus said, gently stirring the eggs. Connection is the goal. He looked directly at the Empress. When I was 7 years old, I got very sick. I couldn't eat anything for 3 days. When I finally started feeling better, the first thing my grandmother made for me was scrambled eggs, just like these. Not because they were the most nutritious thing she could give me, but because she knew they were my favorite. Because making them was her way of showing love. The Empress was quiet, watching the eggs cook with intense concentration. Marcus sliced the bread and put it in a device the technicians had created that worked like a toaster while it browned. He squeezed the oranges by hand, explaining how fresh juice tasted different from anything that could be synthesized. The act of preparation is part of the value, he said, straining the juice through his fingers. Every step is an investment of time and attention. When someone spends that time for you, it means something. The bread popped up, golden brown and warm. Marcus spread butter on it while it was still hot, watching it melt into the surface. The laboratory filled with the smell of toast, eggs, and fresh citrus. The Empress moved closer. These scents. They trigger responses I do not understand. My body seems to be reacting to them. That's your brain remembering what your species gave up, Marcus said gently. The pathways are still there. They're just dormant. He plated everything carefully on dishes the technicians had synthesized. 2 portions, exactly the same. Simple scrambled eggs, buttered toast, and fresh orange juice. It looked humble compared to the advanced technology surrounding them, but to Marcus, it was perfect. Your Majesty, he said, offering her one of the plates. Would you like to try it? The Empress stared at the food like it might explode. Marcus could see fear in her eyes, but also something else. Longing, maybe. Or curiosity that went deeper than anything scientific. I have not consumed solid matter in my entire life, she said. I do not even know how. Marcus sat down at a simple table the technicians had created. It's easy. Just take a small bite, chew it gently, and swallow. Your body will know what to do. He took a bite of his own eggs, closing his eyes as the familiar flavors hit his tongue. Creamy, rich, with just a hint of salt. Simple and perfect, and exactly what he remembered from childhood Sunday mornings. The Empress sat down across from him, still staring at her plate. Slowly, carefully, she picked up a fork and took the tiniest possible bite of egg. The moment the food touched her tongue, everything changed. The Empress's black eyes went wide with shock. She made a small sound, somewhere between a gasp and a cry. The fork fell from her hand and clattered on the plate. What? She whispered. What is this? Marcus leaned forward. What are you feeling? I don't know. The Empress's voice was shaking. There are sensations, flavors, but also something else. Something inside my chest, warm and... She looked at him with confusion and wonder. Is this what you call taste? That's part of it, Marcus said softly. But you're feeling more than just taste, aren't you? The Empress took another small bite, this time of the toast. As the butter and bread flavors combined in her mouth, something extraordinary happened. A single tear rolled down her gray cheek. She reached up and touched it with her finger, staring at the wetness like she had never seen anything like it before. Which, Marcus realized, she probably hadn't. I am leaking, she said in wonderment. You're crying, Marcus told her. It happens when we feel strong emotions. But I do not feel emotions. We eliminated them. Marcus smiled gently. No, Your Majesty, you hid them. But you didn't eliminate them. They were just waiting. The Empress took another bite, and another tear followed the first. Then another. Soon she was crying freely. tears streaming down her face as she tasted orange juice for the first time and experienced the simple joy of a shared meal. "I understand now," she whispered between bites. "This is not about nutrition. This is about," she struggled for the word, "connection. To the food, to the person who prepared it, to memories and feelings that I did not know existed." Marcus nodded. "Every human meal is a small celebration. Every time we cook for someone, we're saying, 'You matter to me.' Every time we eat together, we're sharing more than just food." The Empress finished everything on her plate, crying the entire time. When she was done, she looked at Marcus with eyes that seemed completely different from the cold, calculating stare he had seen before. "Captain Chun," she said, her voice full of wonder and something that might have been gratitude. "What has my species done to itself?" Marcus reached across the table and gently touched her hand. "You tried to become perfect, but you forgot that imperfection is what makes life beautiful." Around them, the Velthari technicians stood in stunned silence, watching their Empress experience emotions for the first time in her 300-year life. And somewhere in the Crystal Palace, alarms began to sound. The alarms were getting louder. Red lights flashed throughout the biosynthesis laboratory, and Marcus could hear the sound of running feet in the corridors outside. The Velthari technicians looked around in panic, not understanding what was happening, but the Empress understood. She was still crying, tears flowing down her gray cheeks as she stared at the empty plate in front of her. Her whole body was shaking. "The connection," she whispered to Marcus. "Our minds are linked. They can feel what I feel." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "All of them?" "Every Velthari in the Empire," she said. "We share consciousness through bioneural implants. It allows for perfect communication and coordination across thousands of worlds." She touched her temple, where Marcus could now see a small metallic device attached to her skull. "But it also means that when I experience something new, they experience it too," Marcus finished. He looked around at the technicians, who were now touching their own temples and making small sounds of confusion and wonder. The laboratory doors burst open. Ambassador Kethron strode in with a dozen guards, their weapons drawn and ready. His face was a mask of fury and fear. "What have you done?" he demanded, pointing at Marcus. "What poison have you fed to our Empress?" The Empress slowly stood up, still wiping tears from her face. Even though she was crying, Marcus could see a new strength in her posture, a confidence that hadn't been there before. "He has fed me nothing but truth, Kethron," she said calmly. "Impossible. The neural link is in chaos. Every Velthari in the Empire is experiencing strange sensations, emotional responses that should not exist. You have been contaminated by this primitive creature." The Empress walked over to stand between Marcus and the guards. "I have been awakened." Kethron's black eyes went wide with horror. "Your Majesty, please. You must submit to immediate neural purification. We can remove these false emotions before they spread further." "False?" The Empress laughed, and it was a sound Marcus had never heard from a Velthari before. Warm and genuine and full of joy. "Kethron, for the first time in my life, I feel truly alive." One of the technicians suddenly gasped and stumbled backward. She was staring at her hands like she had never seen them before. I can feel the warmth of my own skin," she whispered. "And there are colors. When I close my eyes, I see colors that have no names." Another technician sat down heavily on the floor. "There is something in my chest," he said with wonder. "It feels like singing, but inside my body." Kethron drew his weapon, a sleek metal wand that hummed with energy. "This contamination must be stopped immediately. Execute the human. Purge all affected systems." "No," the Empress said firmly. "Lower your weapons. Your Majesty, you are compromised. You cannot make rational decisions in this state. The Empress turned to look at Marcus, and he saw something in her eyes that made his heart skip. It was the same look his grandmother used to give him when she was about to share something important. "Marcus," she said softly, "may I ask you something?" "Of course, Your Majesty." When humans feel these emotions, when you experience joy or sadness or love, does it make you weak? Marcus thought about all the times in his life when emotions had given him strength. The determination he felt when protecting someone he loved. The courage that came from fighting for something he believed in. The way shared laughter could turn strangers into friends. "No," he said honestly. "It makes us stronger. Not physically stronger, but stronger in ways that matter more." The Empress nodded slowly. "I thought so." She turned back to Kethron. "For 10,000 years, we have believed that emotions were weaknesses to be eliminated. But what if we were wrong? What if we threw away the very things that could have made us truly powerful?" "Impossible," Kethron said, but his voice was less certain than before. "Emotions lead to chaos. They make beings unpredictable and inefficient. They make beings creative," the Empress corrected. "They inspire art and music and poetry. They drive exploration and discovery and love." She gestured toward the empty plates on the table. This human took simple ingredients and transformed them into something that could make me feel joy for the first time in 3 centuries. That is not weakness, Kethron. That is magic. Marcus could see that some of the guards were lowering their weapons. They were touching their temples, and he could tell they were experiencing the same awakening that had affected the technicians. Kethron noticed too. "Guards, remember your training. These sensations are poison. They will destroy our perfect society." But one of the guards, a tall female Valthari, removed her helmet and stared at it in wonder. "Perfect," she repeated slowly. "But I do not feel perfect. I feel incomplete, like I have been sleeping for my entire life and am only now beginning to wake up." The emotional awakening was spreading faster now. Through the neural link that connected all Valthari, the experience was rippling across the Empire. Marcus could only imagine what was happening on thousands of worlds as an entire species suddenly rediscovered feelings they had forgotten for 10,000 years. Kethron was becoming desperate. "Your Majesty, please. We must contain this contamination before it spreads beyond the palace. The entire Empire is at risk." "The entire Empire is being saved," the Empress said quietly. She walked over to the table where they had shared the meal and picked up Marcus's empty plate. "Kethron, do you know what this human did for me? He poisoned you with primitive chemicals. He cooked for me," she said, cradling the plate like it was precious. "He took time and effort and care, and he created something beautiful. Not because it was efficient, not because it served any practical purpose, but because he wanted to share something meaningful with another being." She looked at Kethron with tears still shining in her eyes. When was the last time any Valthari created something just for the joy of creation? When did any of us last do something simply because it felt good? Kethron was quiet for a long moment. Marcus could see the conflict in his expression, the struggle between 10,000 years of conditioning and the new sensations that were flooding through the neural link. "But our efficiency," he said weakly. "Our perfect order? What good is order without joy?" The Empress asked, "What value is efficiency if it costs us our souls?" One of the technicians suddenly began to sob. But unlike the Empress's tears of wonder, these were tears of grief. "We have lost so much," she cried. 10,000 years of music we never made. Art we never created. Love we never felt. What have we done to ourselves?" The Empress walked over and put her arms around the crying technician. It was the first act of physical comfort Marcus had ever seen between 2 Valthari. "We made a mistake," she said gently. but mistakes can be fixed. Kethron dropped his weapon. Marcus could see that he was beginning to cry too, though he was fighting it with everything he had. "How?" he whispered. "How do we undo 10,000 years of evolution?" The Empress looked at Marcus. "We learn," she said. "We ask our new friend here to teach us what we forgot. Not just about food, but about all the beautiful, inefficient, wonderful things that make existence meaningful." Marcus felt the weight of that responsibility, but also a deep sense of hope. "I would be honored to help," he said. Through the crystal walls of the laboratory, they could see Valthari throughout the palace stopping their work, touching their faces in wonder, crying, laughing, experiencing emotions for the first time in their lives. An entire civilization was waking up, one tear at a time. 3 months later, Marcus stood in what used to be the Empress's throne room. The cold crystal chamber had been transformed into something warmer. Tapestries now hung on the walls, woven by Valthari, who had rediscovered the joy of creating beauty with their hands. Soft chairs replaced the hard crystal benches, and in one corner, a small kitchen had been installed. The smell of fresh bread filled the air. Marcus was teaching a group of young Valthari how to knead dough, showing them how the simple act of working the mixture with their hands could be both meditation and creation. Their black eyes shone with concentration and delight as they felt the dough change texture under their fingers. "It's alive," one of them whispered in amazement. "I can feel the yeast working." "That's exactly right," Marcus said, smiling. "Bread is a partnership between you and millions of tiny living creatures. They eat the sugars in the flour and create gas bubbles that make the bread rise. You're not just making food. You're conducting a symphony of life." The young Valthari exchanged glances full of wonder. 3 months ago, they would never have understood that concept. The idea that inefficiency could be beautiful, that working with living things instead of controlling them could create something better than perfection. Footsteps announced the arrival of Empress Zethara. She looked different now. Her skin had more color, and her movements were more fluid, more natural. Instead of the flowing white robe she used to wear, she had chosen simpler clothes that allowed her to move freely. Most importantly, her black eyes now sparkled with warmth and curiosity. "How are our students progressing, Ambassador Chen?" she asked, using the title she had given him when she formally appointed him as Earth's first cultural ambassador to the Valthari Empire. "They're natural artists," Marcus replied. "I think your species always had this creativity. It was just sleeping." The Empress watched the young Valthari working with their dough, her expression soft with pride and affection. The ability to feel pride in others' accomplishments was something else her species had rediscovered. Along with love, humor, wonder, and dozens of other emotions they had considered weaknesses. "The daily reports continue to be encouraging," she told Marcus. 73% of our worlds have now established cultural learning centers based on the model we created here. Art production is up by 8,000% across the empire. And yesterday, the first Valthari-composed music achieved interstellar broadcast. Marcus had heard that piece. A haunting melody played on instruments the Valthari had invented just for the purpose of making beautiful sounds. It had made him cry, which had delighted the composer when she heard about it. "What about resistance?" Marcus asked. He knew that not all Valthari had embraced the changes. The Empress's expression became more serious. "About 15% of the population has chosen to undergo neural blocking procedures to prevent them from experiencing emotions. They believe we have become corrupted." She paused. "Kethron leads that faction." Marcus felt sad about that, but not surprised. Change was always difficult, especially when it challenged everything you believed about yourself. "And the other species in the galaxy?" he asked. "How are they reacting to the new Valthari Empire?" The Empress smiled, and it transformed her entire face. They are surprised. For 10,000 years, we were known as cold conquerors who demanded efficiency and perfection from all who joined us. Now they see us laughing, crying, creating art for no practical reason. She laughed herself, a sound that still amazed Marcus every time he heard it. The Andromedans sent a formal diplomatic note asking if we had been replaced by imposters. One of the young Velthari students approached them, holding up a loaf of bread she had just shaped. "Ambassador Chun, is this correct?" Marcus examined the loaf, noting the careful way she had braided the dough and the small decorative cuts she had made in the surface. "It's perfect," he said. "But more importantly, it's uniquely yours. No one else would have made exactly this pattern." The student glowed with pride. "I was thinking about the crystal formations in my home city when I made the cuts. I wanted the bread to remind people of beautiful places." "That," Marcus said, "is exactly what cooking should do. It should carry memories and feelings and a little bit of the person who made it." The Empress watched this exchange with deep satisfaction. "Marcus, I want to ask you something important." They walked together to a balcony that overlooked the Crystal City. Below them, Marcus could see changes everywhere. Velthari tending garden plots they had planted for beauty rather than efficiency. Children playing games their parents had invented for the simple joy of play. Artists painting murals on walls that had been blank for millennia. The Galactic Council has extended an invitation for Earth to join as a full member, the Empress said. "Not as a subject species required to abandon your culture, but as equals. The other species want to learn from you the way we have learned." Marcus felt a surge of pride in his species. "And you supported this?" "I championed it," she said firmly. "I told them that humanity possesses something the galaxy has forgotten. You understand that strength doesn't come from eliminating weakness. It comes from embracing the full spectrum of existence." They stood quietly for a moment, watching the transformed city below. Marcus thought about the long journey that had brought them here. From that first disastrous diplomatic meeting to this moment when two species had learned to share their greatest gifts. "There's something else," the Empress said. "A personal request." Marcus turned to look at her, curious. "I would like you to teach me to cook the meal you prepared for my grandmother," she said softly. "The one she made when you were sick. I want to understand that kind of love." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I would be honored, Your Majesty. But I have to warn you, grandmother's cooking was more about feeling than technique. She never used recipes. She cooked with her heart." The Empress smiled, and Marcus saw tears starting to form in her eyes again. Even after 3 months, she still cried easily, as if making up for 3 centuries of tears she had never shed. "Then teach me to cook with my heart," she said. "Teach me to create food that says, 'I love you' in a language older than words." As they walked back inside together, Marcus heard the sound of laughter from the kitchen where the students were still working with their bread. It was a sound that had never existed in this palace before he arrived. But now it seemed to fill every room. The Velthari had spent 10,000 years perfecting themselves by eliminating everything they considered primitive or inefficient. They had achieved technological marvels, conquered vast territories, and created a society of absolute order. But it took a simple meal prepared by a human prisoner to teach them that perfection wasn't about what you eliminated from life. It was about what you embraced. And sometimes, the most powerful thing in the universe was something as basic as scrambled eggs made with love, shared between friends. Seasoned with tears of joy, Marcus smiled as he began gathering ingredients for another cooking lesson. He had set out to prove that human weaknesses were actually strengths. Instead, he had helped an entire civilization discover that the things that made life inefficient were the same things that made it beautiful. In the kitchen, the Empress was already washing her hands. preparing to learn the ancient human art of cooking with the heart. And in crystal cities across 1,000 worlds, other Velthari were doing the same, rediscovering the joy of being beautifully, wonderfully, perfectly imperfect. The galaxy would never be quite the same again.